I want to understand how these, your three communities are structured. Like you guys have very diverse sort of size of communities as well. So maybe starting from Gotham would be very, very keen. I think you guys have about 500 odd volunteers. How have you structured them?
We were 100% offline community or 100% offline org, right? To a large extent. Just imagine from 2007, we used to be running a monthly networking meet apart from the other initiatives we used to do without a break for 150 months, right? 150 months without a break. Every second Saturday was a startup Saturday, right? And what started off from an IIM Bangalore in early days, right? We of course had our own flings, right? We had a fling with IIM Bangalore initially. Then we loved IBM. We moved to Embassy Golf Flings for many of you who were attending from 2014 to 16. And then we had a fling with SAP. We were hosting it at SAP Startup Studio for about 2-3 years, right? And then in between we moved to Axelar and a bunch of things, right? So we were largely offline, and especially when we started moving beyond the metros, right? 2012-13 saw HeadStart move beyond the metros because we realized 2007-8, you needed an ecosystem enabler in metros to bring people together. What were we end of the day? We were basically an extended shoulder for entrepreneurs to lean on, right? Nothing else. We were able to bring people together month on month and basically share our emotional trauma, which our families don't understand, right? They don't understand why you've left your job to come and start up, right? A lot of things that you just can't expect them to understand. We were just giving them a safe space.
Right.
We realized that after 2012-13, there was no need for a head start for a Bangalore ecosystem or a Delhi ecosystem to thrive, right?
Right.
Startups were being born and were thriving even without an enabler like a head start. So which is where we started consciously saying, it's time to go deeper into tier 2, tier 3, right? Which is where probably 2016 to about 18, 19, saw HeadStart go deeper into tier 2, tier 3, go to about 20 more cities, all driven by passionate volunteers, right? And the best part was, how did HeadStart expand to, regional chapters? Was not a push saying, okay, now Gautam likes Dehradun, let's go to Dehradun, right? It was probably folks who were attending a startup Saturday in a Bangalore, in a Delhi, but their hometown was something else. They're back there, right? I remember there was this volunteer called Divya Pritwani who was chasing me and Amit at HeadStart for about 6 months, saying, this was back in 2015-16, okay? Saying, I've been attending Startup Saturdays in Delhi during my MBA days, and it's so inspiring to just be around, founders and just keep listening to what they network, right? And I really want to do this in Chhattisgarh. Honestly, at that point, I was like, 2015, what is there in Chhattisgarh from a startup ecosystem for a head start to come? Because we are largely volunteer driven, right? And it's always it's not ROI, it's ROE, right? Return on the efforts of volunteers for us as a community, because we need to really, really appreciate every hour or every minute that the volunteer puts in. So for me, it was, I don't think for the effort that we may end up putting in Chhattisgarh, there may be the return or the response from the ecosystem, right? Because there were 2 technology startups that he could name from the state at that point. But the guy was literally mailing and chasing us for 6 months. 6 months. And we said, okay, chalo, let's try it out, right? And we started getting folks together who were interested in the startup ecosystem. We got that. 3 years from then, it was the best chapter at HeadStart. Raipur chapter at HeadStart. And today, of course, from what my folks tell me, there are some 850 startups registered in Chhattisgarh. In fact, I was there in Raipur last month. The kind of activity in Raipur is mind-boggling, right? It requires an evangelist. It requires a community guy to be there before others trust you, right? And say, I think there is a need for a community to be built here. And, you need that, the first 2 people to hook there and say, I will back it till it's, it becomes sustainable. So that was an example. Divya Pritwani did that for Chhattisgarh. Today, if I'm confidently saying, HeadStart had a role to play in Chhattisgarh's startup ecosystem growth, it is not because of HeadStart. HeadStart is what Divya Pritwani did there, right? And the 5-6 volunteer members that he created, which ended up becoming 10 people, 15 people in Raipur. End of the day, if Head Start did something to the ecosystem, honestly, it is nothing that Head Start's done, right? Ultimately, it is the cumulative effort and contribution of the volunteers, right? Gautam may have helped 5 startups. Divya would have helped, say, 15 startups. And ultimately, the volunteers end up being the face of the org or face of the community to, the external ecosystem, right? So the first thing that I wanted to just put it down there is from a volunteer, from a growth of a community perspective, right? There is a starting point for every organization that you want to get started to test what your community wants, and then you scale. So same things happened with Head Start. Pre-COVID, this is how we used to do. We used to test the waters, see where the need was, go ahead and replicate our playbooks in those chapters, and start getting people to come together, the other enablers to come together, right? So 100% offline, 100% volunteer driven. Without a break, we used to meet almost every second Saturday, right? Then post-COVID, we were literally, to be honest, we were literally handicapped for about 6 months. For someone who's been every month out there from 6 a.m. So second Saturday, Startup Saturday for us as volunteer teams, we used to step out of our houses at 6:30 a.m. Head to say IBM's Embassy Golf Links, set things up, put chairs together, put the chairs together, put the ticket counters together, whatever it required to pull off an event, right? 2 hours, 3 hours before, ensure that the experience is good, and then post the event, stay back for 2-3 hours because you were with an extremely overambitious set of folks that you would not meeting at work, right? The biggest draw for volunteers is always the fellow volunteers in a community, right? So it's always 2 draws, right? Fellow volunteers and the mission. If these are the 2 biggest draws, trust me, the community will survive. If it is the incentives that they end up getting out of volunteering, which is the biggest draw for a volunteer, you're somewhere wrong. So for us, at least, I used to head there without a break because I had folks like, say, an Amit, Ujjwal, Prashant Sharma out there who I could, just be around, every second Saturday and just hear them out. Hear them talk about big things, right? Because you never talk about these at work. So what happened post-COVID was 6 months we were literally handicapped, right? Where we didn't know what to do because of 14 years or 13 years, we were completely offline, right? Being out there, mixing with people. And suddenly here you say, boss, there's COVID, everything has to go online, right? So we also struggled, right? It's not always a bed of roses just because you've been around for 13 years. In fact, it's tougher for someone who is not a digital native as an org, right?
Right.
And for us, it was about how do you either close the org, right? Or in 2 quarters and 3 quarters, turn it around from 100% offline org to 100% online org, right? And that's what's happened now. It allowed us to expand further into smaller towns, into the Northeast, into Himachal, into Uttarakhand, set up teams there. And it also allowed us to expand into, say, Finland, Germany in this last 12 months, right? Where we've replicated our volunteer teams there. Broadly, what we've realized is, for us, there are a few layers from an org perspective. We have volunteers, and volunteers itself is split into 2. So we have something called VIPs, right? As soon as, let's say, for example, Nipun wants to volunteer with Head Start, he signs up, a simple form for us to know you better, right? Because end of the day, it's just people coming together, right? And the first level of curation, just based on your answers, we try seeing, is there even, an expectation fit, right? The form is simply from an expectation fit, right? And then a call is set up and we try understanding about the culture fit, right? Because one rotten tomato is enough to spoil the entire passion that all volunteers are putting together.
Right.
So what we realized was, let's allow people to settle down. So the VIP is a VIP. We are allowing him to settle down and figure out, are we a fit for him, right? Of course, we also see, is he a fit for us? But more importantly, are we the org that he wants to volunteer with, right? Because the limited 2 to 4 hours that you have every week, you would rather spend it with a cause that you find meaningful, right? So VIP is nothing but volunteer and probation, right? Where no questions asked, no responsibilities to you. Speak to as many co-volunteers as possible, settle down, right? Enjoy yourself. No expectations from the org on you. At the end of 3 months, you either decide to leave, saying, boss, I don't see a fitment, right? Or you get absorbed into a volunteer, right? And volunteer over a period by what we always say within Head Start is volunteering at Head Start is a training in leadership, right? You get to lead initiatives, you get to design initiatives that you believe is of value, right? Which is where one of the biggest values that we push at Head Start is being action oriented. You can't simply come and say, let's do this, let's do that. Come up with a plan or convince 2 other volunteers on why that plan will work, right? And let's start working on it. So that, especially in the last 12 months, what led us to believe is of this 3 levels at Head Start. Though as an org, it's always flat. Whether you're 1 month into Head Start or you've been there for 14 years, everyone's accessible to everyone, the flat org. But a VIP then becomes a volunteer. And if you end up, really showcasing how you can lead initiatives, you get designated to be a lead at Head Start, a lead volunteer. A lead volunteer gets the ownership and accountability of whatever he decides to own.
Very interesting. I think a lot of follow-up questions, but I'll hold them off right now. Quickly moving to Raj. I want to, for the sake of audience, a lot of people are building these digitally native communities now. I want to know the exact structure of your community in terms of how many volunteers are there, how many volunteers are there in each initiative, and how many initiatives are there, and how is the sort of dynamics, how do you maintain that dynamics, and what's the flow for your community?
Right. So at AJVC, we have around 6 to 7 roughly products that we run. And we have roughly 4 to 5 volunteers in every such product, give or take a couple here and there. So the total volunteer count goes up to 40. And with that in place, the way we have structured this program is that we call our volunteers AJVC Fellows. And it's a structured 4 to 6 month program where they come in, they engage with the product for the product they had demonstrated interest in, and they have a fair amount of ownership, fair amount of sort of free hand to do whatever they want to do with that product. Many times they work with teams, and then based on how they end up running that, because at the end of the day, it's both a push as well as a pull. They would want to stay back with the community as core team members if there is a push that comes in from the volunteers that, hey, you know what, I think I'm interested, and would you consider me to be a part of the core team who actually makes a lot of operational decisions for AJVC on a day-to-day basis. And then based on the work, based on what their